On July 24th, 2018, my next guest lost the love of his life and instantly became a single father of 4 little girls. Jonathan Pitt's wife, Winter, was a well-known blogger, author, and founder of For Girls Like You magazine. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's good to be with you, Maggie.
Yeah. So I remember scrolling through my Instagram feed. I follow you and Winter and a couple of your family members when I heard of Winter's passing. What exactly happened?
She had it's called cardiac dysrhythmia, but basically her heart got off rhythm. She had a heart murmur, which played a part in that, and it was completely tragic for my youngest 3 girls and I that were there, and for her, it was kind of instantaneously moving into the arms of Jesus, and so it was a crazy time in our lives, and God's been really gracious since then, but yeah, it was all heart related.
Yeah,
so.
And I know probably people have asked you so many times how you're doing, but
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I mean, honestly, people say, how are you doing this? And I'm like, only God and Christ in me, the hope of glory. It's not something I feel like I'm doing, but almost like I'm just existing and just trusting God, and God's been faithful.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my story, that God's been faithful and kind and generous in so many different ways. And so his provision has been unbelievable. So. Yeah.
I know you and Winter really were invested in pouring back into your children and being able to give parents tools on how to raise especially young girls. How do you continue that as now a single dad? I mean, the importance of a dad's role in a girl's life is so important.
Yeah.
And now doing that solo by yourself.
Yeah. Well, I would say I'm not doing it by myself. So, Winter and I wrote a book together called She Is Yours, Trust in God as You Raise the Girl He Gave You. That the reality is that as dads, as moms even, that we're stewards. And so on my best day, I'm a steward that God has given a task of helping him to raise. And so they are his daughters first, my daughters second. And so in moments where I feel like I'm not providing perfectly, or I'm not disciplining perfectly, or I'm not being kind enough, or whatever it is, like I go to my dad, who is also their dad, and just trust that he's going to provide for us. And I've had many of those moments, obviously, just in this last season. But God's been good and faithful, and he's been a dad to me, and he's been a dad to his girls. So.
I love that. And also the family that you have around you who have supported you through this. What would you say to fathers watching who are still struggling with finding out what their role is and just struggling with the importance of a dad being even present in their child's life?
Yeah, I mean, I would say just look for where God's looking to plug in others around you. For me, one of the beautiful things is that the day of my wife's funeral, my oldest sister, who's 41 years old, never been married, no kids, said, hey, if you need me, Jonathan, like, I'll drop everything, I'll be there. And I'm like naive enough to be like, I think I'm good. Like, don't worry about it. And I moved states because we were moving for me to pastor at Church of the City in Franklin from Dallas. And like 2 weeks in, I'm like, Carmen, I think I need you. And so my sister has been God's provision to me, and at some level a helpmate, and at levels for my kids, like a surrogate mom. And so God has filled my gaps with her, and I believe that God would want to fill in every gap that a single dad might have, for example, with some other type of provision. And it might look like mine, it might not, but ultimately he's going to provide. So praying and trusting God for whatever he has to fill in gaps for our kids, our daughters. It's needed, because we can't do it all.
Yeah. And how are your girls doing?
They're doing good. They've all dealt with their grief in different ways, and what's been beautiful for me is now, we're about almost a year out, like ultimately, like I know that they have a confidence and a trust in a big God, and there's just a reality that if you didn't know what they've gone through, that you wouldn't know, because they're lovely girls, they're straight A students, they are all in activities, and God's just been really gracious to them, and that's the greatest blessing in my life, because the hardest thing for me as a dad has been helping them grieve well, and so to see where they are right now is I'm really grateful for it.
And it's a testament to you and Winter, just imparting faith and understanding in who Jesus is as they get older.
Well, I'll give more credit to Winter, because ultimately the thing I knew about her, she had a hard life. Like, her dad was a drug addict. She grew up in a single parent home with her mom and her grandmom. And I watched a girl become a survivor who had really difficult circumstances. And now I'm just kind of watching her daughters repeat that. It's difficult circumstances. And I'm watching them lean into God's love and just, at some level pull themselves up by their bootstraps and say, I'm not a victim. And I'm a victor in God, so.
So we see, you're handsome, you're strong, you look like you're
Thank you.
confident in this time. But I'm just thinking of our friends watching who
Yeah.
might have just lost a wife, who are just really struggling to get out of that, knowing that they have children in
Yeah.
the next room that they have to take care of. How has your faith played a significant role in helping you to stand up and be sitting here today?
Yeah, well, I don't always look like this with my suit jacket on and my hair done. I mean, ultimately, I remember the first couple of weeks being really dark for me and just having this feeling of my wife's at the funeral home or my wife's in the ground or like those kind of feelings, like just cold, dark, dreary days. And the beautiful thing is that God's light shone through all of that. And so day by day, I think grown stronger. And my faith was there all along. Like even from the day that she took her last breath, the moment she took her last breath, I was singing in her ear, just reminding myself of who God is and reminding her of where she was going. But ultimately, just lean into God's love, because ultimately that's all we really have, and our relationships are all we have, and enjoy them while you have them, because you just never know how long they'll be there. But for that dad that's just lost a spouse, or that anybody that's lost a loved one, like ultimately, that the moment that loved one left, if they are in Jesus, is not a moment where they're going to see them again. Yeah. And so there's hope in that. Yeah. There's hope in the cross. There's hope that we have, and I've said that for years and years and years, and I've experienced loss at different levels and had to believe that. But this is the closest it's been, and I can say that God's really been faithful. Yeah, and I trust that.
And what is probably the biggest lesson that you've learned from Winter, and just being her husband for 15 years?
Yeah, so Winter was a really introverted girl, quiet girl. She was a peacemaker. She was not a people pleaser. And so for me, I was moving fast and people pleasing and all that. And there's two pictures above my bed, and one says be, the other one says still. And that was Winter. That was the air she breathed. She was not rushed about things. She was not hurried about things. Even though she was doing big things for the Lord, like in her writings and all that, deadlines didn't bother her.
Yeah.
She never felt like hard pressed to do anything. And
she was present.
Yeah, she's present.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's actually been the hardest thing for me to do, is be present, especially in my grief. And so those words above my bed, every day I look at them, it's Winter telling me, just be still, Jonathan. God's got this. God's got the girls. God's got you. He's going to provide. You don't have to you don't have to do it for him, So that's probably it.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for sharing with us today.
Yeah, glad to be with you.
And I hope what Jonathan said really resonates with you if you're celebrating Father's Day today. Maybe you've had a struggle with your father. Maybe you don't have great memories of your dad, or maybe you have excellent memories of your dad, or maybe you're a dad right now that just is struggling to just be present and be still with your children. I want you to know that our prayer lines are always available, prayer partners that would love to pray with you, encourage you, and remind you of, as exactly what Jonathan said, we have a heavenly Father that loves you deeply, cares about you so much, knows every hair on your head, knows exactly what you're going through, and wants to be present in your life. The phone number is at the bottom of your screen, 1-866-273-4444, or you can email prayer@crossroads.ca. Stay with us. We'll be right back.